nostalgia hits harder as you get older. While I was playing Alto's adventure, I was thinking about something strange. Something can disappear from your life for years and you don't really think about it. An old video game, a television commercial, a song you haven't heard since you were a kid, the sound of a PlayStation turning on, walking through a video store on a Friday night, and then completely out of nowhere, you experience it again. And suddenly, you're not sitting where you are right now. For just a second, you're somewhere else. Maybe you're 10 years old again, sitting on the floor in front of the television, controller in your hands, with absolutely nowhere you need to be. And somehow, that memory feels warmer than you remember it actually being. While we make our way through the mountains in Alto's adventure, I thought we'd talk about nostalgia, why it feels so powerful, why certain memories become more important as we get older, and why sometimes the smallest things from our childhood can transport us back in time. One thing I've noticed about childhood memories is how enormous everything seemed. A neighborhood wasn't just a neighborhood, it was your entire world. The woods behind someone's house could feel like an unexplored wilderness. A trip to the mall could feel like an event. And getting a new video game that would consume your entire weekend, maybe longer. You'd read the instruction manual, look at the artwork, study the back of the box, and imagine everything that might be waiting inside that game. Sometimes, the anticipation was almost as exciting as actually playing it. That's something that's difficult to recreate as an adult, because when you're young, so many experiences are happening for the first time. Your first favorite movie, your first console, your first time staying up way too late playing a game, your first concert, your first big sporting event, the first time you're seeing a movie that completely blows your mind. Those experiences don't have decades of memories competing with them. They're new, and because they're new, they leave a mark. There's probably no better example of nostalgia than old video games, because gaming memories aren't just visual, they're sounds, menus, music, controller noises, and startup screens. Thinking about hearing the original PlayStation startup or the PS2, that strange, almost futuristic sound, followed by the familiar menu. You could probably close your eyes and hear that sound, and immediately picture the room where you used to play. Maybe an old bedroom, maybe a living room, maybe your friend's house. You remember the television, you remember where the console was sitting. You might even remember the carpet. That's the strange part. The game isn't the only thing you remember. You remember the world surrounding the game. And sometimes that's what we're actually nostalgic for. Not necessarily the game itself, but the person we were when we played it. Another memory that's slowly becoming impossible for younger generations to experience. Walking into a video store, especially on a Friday night. You'd walk through rows and rows of movies, looking at VHS tapes and later DVDs, trying to decide what we're going to watch that weekend. And if the movie you wanted wasn't available, that was it. There wasn't another streaming service. There wasn't an instant rental button. Somebody else had that movie. You'd had to choose something different. And strangely, that limitation made choosing a movie feel more never was on. Maybe you had cereal in front of you. Maybe everyone in the house was still sleeping. And for a couple hours, the entire world felt quiet. These mornings weren't important when they were happening. Nobody sat there thinking, I need to remember this. You were just living. That's what makes nostalgia so strange. Some of the memories we eventually treasure the most were completely ordinary when they happened. Then there was the early internet, a completely different world. It felt mysterious, unpredictable, sometimes barely functional. You'd hear the modem connecting. You'd wait forever for a web page to load. Downloading something could take hours, sometimes longer. And somehow, that made the internet feel enormous. There weren't a handful of massive platforms controlling most of what you saw. You'd stumble across strange websites, forums, fan pages, game walkthroughs, message boards, and places that looked like somebody built them in their bedroom. Because, well, somebody probably did. The internet felt less polished, but maybe because of that, it felt more personal. You weren't constantly being shown what an algorithm thought would keep you watching. Sometimes you had to actually search for things, and sometimes you discover something completely unexpected. Childhood summers might be one of the strangest sources of nostalgia, because summer seemed endless. The last day of school arrived, and suddenly, you had an entire lifetime ahead of you, or at least that's what 2 or 3 months felt like. You'd wake up, and the biggest question might be, what are we doing today? Ride bikes, play basketball, play video games, go swimming, walk to a friend's house, do absolutely nothing. And somehow, doing absolutely nothing didn't feel like a waste of time. There's something adulthood changes. As adults, we're constantly aware of time, appointments, work, bills, schedules, deadlines, things we should probably be doing. Even relaxation can sometimes feel scheduled. But when you're a kid, an afternoon can feel infinite. And that brings us to something almost everyone notices eventually. Time seems to speed up. Remember how long a school year felt? It felt enormous. Summer vacation felt enormous. Waiting for Christmas felt like an eternity. Now, a year can disappear before you realize what happened. January becomes summer. Summer becomes Halloween. Halloween becomes Christmas. And suddenly, another year is gone. There are different explanations for why this happened. Part of it may simply be perspective. When you're 10 years old, 1 year represents 10% of your entire life. When you're 40, 1 year is a much smaller fraction. But there's another interesting possibility. Routine. When you're young, everything is new. Your brain is constantly recording new experiences, new teachers, friends, places, new video games, movies. As adults, life can become more repetitive. We wake up, work, come home, handle responsibilities, go to sleep, repeat. And when fewer things stand out, large periods of time can blend together. Maybe that's one reason nostalgia becomes stronger. Old memories feel incredibly detailed because they come from a period when everything felt new. But here's the question. Was the past actually better, or do we just remember the good parts? Because nostalgia has a habit of editing memories. We remember playing games with friends, but we forget about the controller that barely worked. We remember renting movies, but we forget driving all the way to the video store. We remember old games being amazing, but we forget how terrible the camera controls, loading screens, memory cards, and losing hours of progress because we forgot to save. We remember childhood summers. We forget being bored, really bored. The kind of boredom where you'd walk into the kitchen, open the refrigerator, stare at it, and then immediately close it. That's probably why people continue to return to old video games. Sometimes you aren't replaying the game, you're revisiting a memory. You boot up something you haven't played in 20 years, and suddenly, you remember exactly where everything is. Your hands remember, your brain remembers, and the level you haven't seen since childhood still feels familiar. And even if the graphics look much rougher than you remember, there's something comforting about it. Because for a little while, the world feels familiar again, predictable, safe. You already know the adventure, you already know the characters, you know the music. It's like visiting an old neighborhood. Everything might look smaller, but you still know the way around. Here's something I think we rarely consider. We're probably living through nostalgic memories right now. There are things we complain about today that we'll eventually miss. Games we're currently playing, phones we're currently using, music we're currently hearing everywhere, restaurants we assume we will always be around. People assume we'll always be able to call. Places we drive past without even noticing 10, 20, 30 years from now. Something completely ordinary from today might suddenly become incredibly meaningful. Maybe someone will hear the startup sound from a PlayStation 5 and immediately remember sitting in their apartment in 2026. Maybe people will talk about today's internet the same way people now talk about the internet from 25 years ago. Maybe we'll look back at today's game and say, games were different back then. Which is funny because people were already saying that about games from 20 years ago. Every generation eventually becomes nostalgic for its own ordinary world. Maybe nostalgia isn't really about wanting to go backward. Because if we could actually return, we might discover that the past wasn't exactly how we remembered it. Maybe nostalgia is simply our brain reminding us that something mattered, that moment mattered, that game mattered, that friendship mattered, even if we didn't realize it at that time. And maybe that's why nostalgia becomes stronger as we get older, because eventually you understand something that you couldn't as a kid. Nothing stays exactly the same. Places change, people change, technology changes, and ordinary moments eventually become memories. So maybe the lesson isn't that everything used to be better. Maybe it's that we should pay a little bit more attention to the things that feel ordinary right now. Because somewhere in the future, there's probably a version of you who would give almost anything to experience one completely normal day. From today, just one more time. And while Alto keeps moving forward across another mountain through another sunset, maybe that's a pretty good place to leave this thought. You can't ride backwards. You can't replay every moment. You just keep moving forward, collecting little memories along the way. And every once in a while, something brings one of them back. A song, movie, a game, and just for a few seconds, you're there again. I think that's one of the beautiful things about nostalgia. It reminds us that even the moments that seem completely ordinary were still becoming part of our story. The games we played, the movies we watched, the places we went, the people we spent our time with. We didn't know we were making memories. We were just living. So maybe tonight, after this video is over, think about something small from your past that you haven't thought about in a long time. An old game, a Saturday morning, a summer afternoon, and just let yourself remember it for a little while, because sometimes it's nice to visit those places again, even if it's only in our memory.